Hi teams, welcome to the training. Today this is the kind of a bigger kind of piece around the data-driven creative series. This is the module one, which we'll be covering today. And essentially today, what we're going to be covering in module one is around display and video 360, giving you a little bit of about an intro around it, and why it's important for kind of creatives and media agencies to understand it and use it, etc. And then we're going to touch on a little bit around how to use templated creatives. So DV360 has some quite unique features around it inside around the creative piece. So we're going to kind of touch on that and how to use it, etc., etc. But let me jump straight into it. First of all, hello. These sessions are covered by myself, Marcel. I look after something called Google Marketing Platform within Sub-Saharan Africa. And Artwell would also he's the creative lead for Sub-Saharan Africa at Google, and he would be covering some of the other sessions. So most of these sessions will be covered by one of us. But yeah, I'm going to be kicking off with this session today. As I said, in these trainings, we essentially, it's broken up into some modules, which you'd probably realize that there's different modules. There's 6 of them. And really what we want to get out of all these modules is how can you build kind of impactful creatives at scale with audience relevance, like personalized creatives, et cetera, essentially, and build data-driven creatives. So that's essentially the mix of all these modules. I'm going to quickly go through some of the modules and what we're going to cover. So module 1 is the one you're on today, and that's what we're going to cover in terms of this online webinar training. So that's what we're going to cover today. Module 2 is around Google Web Designer, which is our design tool. So definitely check out module 2 because it will intro around what Google Web Designer is, how can you build some creatives, et cetera, et cetera. And then it goes more into depth around Google Web Designer components, which is kind of the essence of Google Web Designer in terms of how to use it. And then we're going to jump into how to build responsive ads or responsive banners, which is pretty cool. So how can one banner scale based on different sizes, and how can you have some control on some of the elements, which is pretty cool. And then we're going to touch on how to execute data-driven creative, which is probably the most needed that we see. But you need to do module kind of 1 to 4 to understand how to execute in module 5. So it's a bit of a build-up. But how to execute data-driven creative, that session is really key around what is the process? Where should we start? Everyone wants to do it and wants to do data-driven creative, but essentially, what are the steps? So definitely check out that module because we cover it in that section. And then module 6 is how can you build like an interactive banner? So how do you build like a microsite within a banner? So it's quite a cool session around more advanced features of Google Web Designer. And then we've got something, TBC, which is kind of module 7. That would be additional trainings that we'd be adding on based on the feedback that we're getting from the teams. But today we're going to cover module 1. Module 1 is essentially more around a kind of an intro to this whole process. And the key pieces to data-driven creative essentially is mainly around DV360 or something called Display and Video 360 and Google Web Designer. But today we're going to do the intro into Display and Video 360. We're going to talk about like what creative features are currently available. We'll do some live demos, and then we'll talk about next steps. So what is Display and Video 360? Display and Video 360 is essentially a media buying tool, or it's a buying door to inventory. At Google, we have 2 buying doors, if you call it that. So where you would, as a media buyer, would buy media. So we've got something called Google Ads, and we've got something called Display and Video 360. So where Display and Video 360, or what it does, it's called the DSP or demand side platform, but essentially what it is a consolidated media buying platform where you can buy lots of things in one place, which is great because if you want to tie creative to it, you want to kind of have one place where you're buying all your inventory or all your assets or kind of inventory in one place, so you can serve different creatives where needed. So Display and Video 360 is essentially a consolidated media buying tool that can buy across a lot of different inventory and a lot of different kind of inventory types. And that could be an example. You could buy YouTube. You could potentially buy a skin or a homepage takeover on a local publisher. You can buy your normal, let's call it programmatic display. You can buy audio ads. So think about like podcasts or online streaming stations. You can buy ads on there, and you can buy native, and there's lots. It essentially buys a lot in one place, which is really nice in terms of when you're thinking about creatives. So I'm not going to touch too much on it, but essentially, when you're thinking, if you're a creative, this is what your media team would actually buy your media through. So where they would execute and kind of target specific audiences, it would be through a tool like Display and Video 360. Display and Video 360, like I said, can buy on different inventory types. So it's, when we talk about Display and Video 360 or the word programmatic or right time, right place, etc., we really just focus on the display piece in most cases. But what's great about Display and Video 360, it can buy your display, it can buy your native, it can buy your Gmail, it can buy YouTube, it can buy programmatic video, audio, etc. So it's buying a lot of things in one place, which is really nice. And when you start thinking about data-driven creative, yes, we're going to touch on more the display side and how to execute that. But then you probably want to start thinking about how can we be a little bit smarter around data-driven creative on video? How can we be smarter around data-driven on audio? So those are the next steps. But I would say dip your toes into the display piece, and then you can kind of kick it off from there. Essentially, media buying today and where it's changed, it's probably not today, it's probably many, many, many years ago, has changed is where we essentially, we're buying audiences. We're trying to target specific audiences, and we're using technology like Display and Video 360 to reach the right person at the right moment. That's how media has changed. It's really changed from just I don't want to say old school, but a different way of buying back in the past, where you used to just sign something and then run some advertising. Now you've got full control, and you're targeting more on audiences versus just kind of the placements kind of piece. Artwell will actually touch more around why it's important around focusing on audiences in Module 5 and giving you some good examples around demographic targeting, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. So definitely check it out. And why it's so important that, we can target this, the right message, we can target the right person at the right time. But usually what we show them is the same message. If they are a client, if they aren't a client, it's usually just the same banner. There's no personalization. It's really just the same creative. And it seems like creative has really got stuck in this world of GIFs. It really hasn't evolved into like HTML5 and doing more impactful pieces of creative. So when I chat to brands, usually what I say to them is, they're running their creative or they're running their campaigns, and they say to me, Marcel, it's not really performing. And then I look at the creative and I'm like, this creative looks like it could have been developed like a few years ago. It's not up to date. It's not kind of breaking through the clutter. Because when we speak about, who their target audience is and who, or who their competitors are, they usually compare themselves to the vertical. But essentially, how media is changed is you shouldn't be just comparing, or you shouldn't just be comparing yourself to a vertical where you are all targeting a specific audience. That audience is seeing multiple ads from multiple brands. It doesn't matter only if you're in a finance vertical, etc. It's across all. So your competition is actually everyone. So you need to have your creative being the most impactful and relevant to that user to get them to either take an online action or do something offline. And that's why creative is so important. You can optimize campaigns as much as you can and to get the best out of it. But, we've done some studies internally at Google, and I think the stats from 2016, but the stat is around 70% of campaign performance comes down to creative. Creative is extremely important. And usually we don't give enough focus to creatives. We usually just say, okay, here's a banner, run it on digital. Oh, why did the CPA not do well, or whatever the case may be? We actually don't really kind of think about how impactful the creative is and showing them all this user-specific message for them to complete the action. So it's extremely important. And I think that's why we're really honing in on this kind of next kind of 6 modules is around getting your creative right, because that's essentially how you're going to stand out and really kind of drive performance for your clients. The cool thing about Display and Video 360, or another name we just shortened is DV360, there's actually creative solutions and tools that make it easier for advertisers to develop these high quality experiences to users while achieving those campaign goals. So we've actually kind of we're adding a lot more creative features to our tools, because now we know the importance of what creative has essentially on performance. So Display and Video 360 has something called the creative module within the UI. It's might be a little bit blurry on your side. I'm actually going to live demo it, so don't stress too much. Essentially, there's a kind of a creative workspace or creative module within inside here where creative teams can get access. So it's not just the media teams have access to this. If you are working with a media team, they can actually give you creative access, which is awesome. So then you can also take a look at all the creative features. You can also optimize campaigns. You can optimize creatives based on kind of performance and see what's working, what's not. I used to work at an agency, and many years ago, we used to do these things like QBRs or whatever the case may be. And then, we would sit there and then essentially, I would be the media agency and pull up an Excel and say, wow, the blue button did really better than the red button. Why, maybe we should look at that in the future. To be honest, that's 3 months or 6 months too late. How advertising is changing now is that media and creative should be a lot closer together and working a lot closer together, where, you want to be looking essentially at the same plate of food to make calls together and say, wow, okay, this creative is not performing this week. On your weekly optimization calls, can you be like, can we change this? Can we tweak this? This seems to be resonating. How can we break this out into more creatives, etc., and optimize on the go versus just, sitting every 3 to 6 months and looking at creative. So we've got this cool creative module within Display and Video 360 that the media teams can grant access to creative agencies, and then everyone can, essentially look at the same plate of food and work on campaigns together from the creative sense. So what can this creative module essentially do in Display and Video 360? We have something called Ad Canvas. So Ad Canvas allows you to build creatives within the tool. It's not a replacement to like a Photoshop and things like that. Essentially, you're using templates that's essentially built into the tool. And then you're dropping in a logo, you're dropping in some imagery, you're changing text. But a really nice piece around this is how you can kind of manage ads at scale. As you can see in the example, they're just clicking on make a copy, and you can build so many different iterations of the creatives at speed and at scale, which is really nice to see. Then we've got something also which is called our format gallery. So these are templated formats that is available in our format gallery. It's essentially kind of a one-stop shop to browse all of our formats that we have. Yes, this is not an extensive range of hundreds and millions of formats. Essentially, these are good ones for you to execute and start picking up. But essentially, you would probably want to build your own custom templates. So what the functionality that I'll show you within here, it's good to understand that you can actually build your own custom templates, bring your own custom fonts in. Maybe your client has a corporate identity or digital kind of look and feel that needs to stay insert, logo at the bottom right or whatever. But you can actually build those custom templates and bring them inside Display and Video 360 and have the same functionality that I'm going to show you now with some of the templated creatives. So these are just some thought starters for you to play around with, some quick, drag and drop kind of creatives and scaling. But you can bring in some customized templates and creatives that you like. And Artwell is going to kind of touch on that in the next modules. So what are some of the templates we do have available, which are pretty cool? So we've got something called Panorama, which is kind of on the left-hand side here, you'll see it's like kind of like a scrollable creative. So when the user's going through the content, it'll show you one image, and then you can kind of scroll, you can kind of swipe to the left, and then it brings in different content pieces, etc. So quite an interactive creative. And this is very different to, our 3 frames GIF kind of banner. It's more interactive and you can actually play around with it, and it's quite easy to build. I'll show you how to build that. Another one which is really nice is QCard. So QCard, essentially, it's just a static image. So you're looking at a 300 by 250 here, but essentially it's just a static image at the back. And then what you can do is edit the text. It's similar to Panorama, where you're swiping from kind of left to right, where now you're just swiping up from top to bottom. So allowing you to swipe through it. But what's great about this is it takes a simple static banner, a static creative at the back, and then you can essentially edit the text and you're good to go. We've got some other formats. So these formats are pretty cool, where these are native formats. So native formats essentially are formats that fit a little bit more within the content when users are scrolling. You'll see a lot of them out there when, in terms of your day-to-day when you're online, etc., etc. And what's great about this, if you've got any social campaigns or social creative that you're using, you can reuse that in kind of the digital aspect, which is really cool. So if you have a 1-2 by 6-8, some headline and some description, you can actually just enter that in the tool, and you're good to go. And you've got digital creative that can expand not just on social channels but in other areas. And you can do the same with video. Essentially, just upload a video, upload a logo, upload some content in terms of like text, and you're pretty much good to go. And this can scale quite easily. Really great option if you potentially, campaign deadline and you've only rolled out certain assets on social. How can you still get that reach and expand on display? Really great option in terms of native display. We've got some other cool templates which are a little bit more engaging. So the one on the left is called Flipbook. This is a super easy one to build. Essentially, all you're doing is uploading a video, you're editing the call to action, and you're uploading a logo and changing a few colors. But as you can see in the functionality, what happens is as soon as someone scrolls, the video almost like fast forwards or plays, and then when you scroll down, it rewinds. Really impactful, really cool creative. This you don't see, normal creative. This someone would be stop and be like, whoa, what's going on here? So it's actually taking a video, and then you choose those 5 seconds that you want to execute on. And then as the user scrolls, it kind of fast forwards and follows them. And when they rewind, and then when they scroll down, it kind of rewinds. And if they want to watch more, they click on it, and then the whole entire video plays. So really nice, kind of impactful, creative. What I like about this is sometimes the video assets we potentially have, the first 5 seconds or 10 seconds might not be that impactful. So what's great about this is you can choose 5 seconds of the video that you want to fast forward and rewind, where potentially like this, it's the car driving or a wheel spinning or a rev counter. Think about it where you can look at the video and say, wow, this is quite a cool piece. Imagine this moving when someone's scrolling. So it doesn't just have to be the first 5 seconds. You can actually customize that. Then something else which is called Parallax. Very similar in terms of the use when someone scrolls and the creative kind of moves or moves forward and kind of goes down. Very similar to the video one, but this is more display, where what this allows you to do is kind of build animations based on the scrolling. This is not as easy as uploading a few images. You need to do it with Google Web Designer, but Artwell is actually going to touch on this and actually show you how to build this, I think in module 3. But it's actually really simple. You can build it in like a few minutes. But essentially, you've got a few images, and then you have like a start phase. So when someone starts scrolling and when someone's ends scrolling, and then you set kind of 2 phases to it. How does it look when before the scrolling, and how does it look after, and that movement? And then you can get to these kind of assets, so which is pretty cool. So loads of templates that are already there for you to use. Parallax, you need to do a little bit more work. But in terms of Flipbook, native, etc., cue cards, it's really easy just to drop some images, drop some stuff in, and you're good to go. And essentially, like you've seen these creatives, essentially, this helps in terms of kind of being data driven, where you can build lots of creatives at scale by just saying make copy, make copy, make copy. You can actually have different creatives based on different audiences, changing an image or changing a logo or whatever the case may be, or a call to action. So allowing you to be more data driven. Also, in terms of that, the creative teams and the media teams can look at the same kind of plate of food, where they can be like, wow, what's working, what's not. So allowing you to look at the data and make calls, which is great. The second point is around engaging. So building kind of templates that are engaging. So think about Flipbook, someone scrolling and that video's kind of fast forwarding, rewinding, really cool, impactful, creative. It's not just your standard like static banners or your standard GIFs, first frame, second frame, third frame, call to action. It's actually really nice and engaging and different to what the users potentially or the audience is potentially seeing currently now. And then lastly, present. So like using your social assets on native, you can be present across other channels. And how can you be present with, say, cue cards and making it easier for you to be present where potentially you weren't. So really nice kind of way that Creative Module allows you to be. Cool. So I'm going to jump into a live demo. So I'm going to jump into a few pieces of the live demo. So give me 1 second. First of all, for those of you who have who don't have DV360 access yet. Potentially you don't have DV360 access yet, don't stress. If you wanted to look at those templates that I was covering and talking about, you can go to something called richmediagallery.com, go to the formats tab, and then all those formats that I was kind of touching on, Flipbook, native video, parallax, etc., are all in here for you to kind of read up and see what you can do. It's really nice kind of, just if you wanted to kind of see what's available, really helpful to just kind of scroll and potentially if you like the parallax example, you can click on it and see an example. You can see the specs that's potentially needed to build it. It might give you a few more other examples. This one's quite a nice one with like a car driving up the screen, just to give you some inspiration based on it. And yeah, definitely take a look at it. Rich Media Gallery, if you don't have access to the creative module in DV360, a really nice way to do it and see what's needed, like here's an example of, this flipbook example. You just need kind of your video assets, your logo and your call to action, and you're good to go. Another example of someone running, you can see how cool that is when someone's running. It just stops the user and be like, wow, this is quite impactful creative. And all it's taking is a video creative, some logo and a call to action, and you're pretty much good to go. So if you don't have access, remember you can go to richmediagallery.com. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you with inside DV360. We've got something called Format Gallery. So Format Gallery looks really similar to the Rich Media Gallery, as I said. So if you look at both of them, they're kind of the same thing. But this is actually built within the tool. So here you can see all those examples that I was touching on, which is really nice. You can scroll between, like if you only want to look at native, potentially you want to look at display kind of units, or if you just want to look at all of them in general. So really nice in terms of how you can kind of discover them and take a look at them. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually build a creative. So to show you a little bit around Ad Canvas and how that can work. And then I want to show you around those data-driven elements that you can start thinking about. So essentially in terms of, for this example, let me just use Panorama. So Panorama is that kind of scrollable one that I was talking about earlier, from the left to right where you can kind of scroll. So all you need to do here is just say create. And then what it's going to do is it's going to open up that piece called Ad Canvas. What's great about these, they're responsive creative. So if you wanted to build all the responsive sizes at once, you could. For this example, I'm not going to build all sizes at once. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to build a 300 by 250 for this example. So let me select the size, 300 by 250. As you can see, it gives me kind of an empty template there. Let's give it a name called version 1. And then it's going to ask you to upload certain assets here. So let's upload a background image. So give me 1 second to upload this. So I'll upload a background image. And then based on the template, these images were created. So my design team, or Artwell, created some of these images for me to upload because he knew what specs I needed. So it makes it easy for me to upload certain elements. So let me add a shirt or two. This is just a fictitious brand called YOLO that sells shirts. Just for use case in the example. So as you see, I've uploaded certain images on the right hand side, and then when I scroll through the banner, you can start seeing the floating kind of shirts and where they sit based on the template. So these were based on the template that we had, but it's really nice to kind of have this essentially quite easy to upload in that space. Then we can start editing the text. So we can say this is a banner, really giving you ease of use in terms of changing and getting it right. And then what we can do here is say, get all your, shopping needs. Sorry, I'm not a copywriter, but you can kind of get the gist of it. And then essentially here, let's change the call to action to say potentially shop now. Maybe the call to action button, I want to just get the same red as, the same red is there. So let's get it there. Awesome. So we use the dropper. We get the same color there. Potentially, I don't like this white piece on it. So potentially, I want to change the styling a bit. Let's drop this down. Yeah, there we go. So now we've got a bit of a transparent banner that says this is a banner, not the best copy, of course. and then get all your shopping needs, shop now. But what if your client said, hey, I would love to test, shop now and buy now? So pretty easy. All you need to do is on the top here, there's something called make copy. You click on that, and then it essentially makes a copy of the existing banner that you just have. So let's call this version 2. And now we've got a banner called version 2. And now we can just go here and just change the call to action to say buy now. So now we've got 2 banners, one saying shop now, one saying buy now. Awesome. But now what happens is we want to do data-driven creative, or we want to change certain elements of it, or maybe we know that a certain region has more stock than someone else, or selling more, or maybe a certain audience is wants to see this, or etc. etc. What you can do essentially is just say you can select a banner again. You can select 2 at once, or you can just select 1. You can just say make copy. Let's target this one to Edenvale. I'm from Greenstone, so in Edenvale, and then I want this banner to be shown to people in Edenvale or Greenstone area. But in Greenstone, I know that checkered shirts. We have lots of stock of checkered shirts, so we want to sell a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually upload the checkered shirt. There you go. So the Edenvale person will see this. And then what I want to do is create, let's say Cape Town. I'm just choosing different towns. So say Cape Town, we want to show them, I don't know, the blue shirt first. Let's give them the blue shirt. So I'm just going to swap out the first image. So now what I've really done is already built a generic creative. So version 1 and version 2 to test different call to actions. And then I've built an Edenvale specific creative and a Cape Town specific. But you can see, you can just say make copy, and you can start scaling and building this. Essentially, you need to have a bit of a plan in terms of what needs to, or what audiences you're going to target, or what's the strategy behind this. We will cover a bit more of that in kind of module 5. So definitely watch that to kind of get some guidance. Cool. But then what if we have a sale? So we want to run something for a sale, and then we want the generic creative to run. So let's make a copy. Let's call this sales creative. So now we've got a sales creative. And then I want to upload something that says, I don't know, let me see what I've got here, limited stock. So let's upload that says limited stock. And then we can give it 1 second. So now we've got a sales creative and we've got different regions. Awesome. So now what we want to do is, essentially what we want to do is attach kind of triggers or kind of rules to it, essentially, to say if a person is in this region, serve this ad. If a person is in this audience, serve this ad, if that makes sense. Because what's changing is your campaign is, say, targeting South Africa, but what's changing is where the user is, or what, the information on the user, and you're not building different campaigns on the media side. You're essentially targeting South Africa. But if the user is in this region, show this. If the user is in this region, show this, etc., etc. So what you can do is apply something called dynamic rules. And dynamic rules is actually kind of, helping you to deliver that kind of relevant message by putting rules or triggers on these creatives. What dynamic rules, you can add signals to it. You can say if someone's in a specific audience. So if someone is a 30-minute chef, let's show them this. If someone's interested in sports, let's show them this, or interested in a Ford, let's show them this. So you can have different kind of, creatives. Potentially sports will be a generic one, but then if someone's interested in baseball, does your creative kind of tie into baseball? So a really nice way to kind of, trigger different audiences and showing different creatives. You can also do categories. For this example, I'm going to do locations because that's kind of what I've... Cool. Let's say we want to target Edenvale. So Edenvale, give me 1 second, can't spell. Edenvale. And then now we want to target Cape Town. So we go Cape Town. Awesome. There we go. As you can see, you can also do some neighborhoods and different things, but let's just choose Cape Town for this one. Awesome. Now we want to just say done. So we've selected those regions where we want different ads to show. And then it takes us to a screen called dynamic rules, which is pretty cool, where essentially what this is saying is, in this priority, if someone is in Edenvale, assign the variant or assign the creative. So you go assign and you look for your Edenvale creative, you select it, you say done. Now, if the user's in Edenvale, they'll see this creative. If someone's in Cape Town, let's assign them the Cape Town creative. But what if someone's not in these two areas? So for everyone else, let's assign those two kind of creatives, that version 1 and 2, just those generic ones. Cool. So we've got if anyone else, let's show them these two creatives. But if people are in these areas, Edenvale and Cape Town, let's show them the Edenvale creative or the Cape Town creative. Then what you can do is add on kind of a schedule, which is pretty cool. So you can say, if we're running a sale between this date and essentially this date, run this creative, and between this date and this date, let's run another creative. Then what you can do is now you can look at it and says, if someone is in Edenvale between this date, let's change the creative. Let's change the creative from Edenvale to the sales creative. Say done. So now it says, if someone in Edenvale between this date, give sales creative. If after the date, just show generic Edenvale. Let's do the same for Cape Town. So let's change that and go sales creative, and we go done. Awesome. Set up, we save draft, we're good to go. And now we've, let me enter a name quickly. So we've got of the creative. So now essentially we've saved draft, and now it's good to go. And if we're happy with it, we can essentially just publish it, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so that's it in terms of ad canvas and how do you kind of tie in those dynamic rules. And what I was really showing there is, you've got this format gallery, you can build on all these templates, but it's quite easy to scale. And as you can see, what's also great about this, if you wanted to share examples, what you can do is just get, your preview links. So you can share those links to other people so they can see it and see if they approve it or whatever the case may be. But a real nice way to kind of scale and build those creatives. Cool. But I'm going to stop there on that kind of templated creative, and I'm going to jump back into the presentation. Cool. So we did the live demo. I kind of touched on a few areas around it. Definitely reach out if you want to know a little bit more around it. The biggest question I get asked is, how do we get access, Marcel? Essentially what you can do is just reach out to your media team. So they're using DV360 or Display and Video 360 to buy media. They can essentially give you creative access. Or if you can't get creative access just yet, just jump onto richmediagallery.com, take a look at the templates, and then start planning on how you can start building some of these assets that can fit in those templates. So those are kind of two ways you can go about it. And then another question I get asked is, Marcel, but these are just templates. How do we customize it? How do we build our own templates? How do we, my client loves the logo to be on the top left. How do we move it? How do we do this? Essentially, we're going to touch on that in the next few modules. But essentially, what you do need is something called Google Web Designer. And Google Web Designer, you would actually build your own kind of banner set or your own banners. And then you would tell the banner which elements you want to allow to be changeable. So upload a shirt, etc. And then what you can do is bring that back into this tool and then do the same functionality that I was doing with those other creatives. So really giving you the customization option, but you need to use Google Web Designer, which Artwell will cover from module 2. So definitely catch the other trainings. And yeah, that's it from our side. Thanks for joining. Shout if there's anything, but definitely catch module 2, module 3, module 4, module 5, module 6. Google Web Designer, amazing tool. Jump in, figure it out. I'm a media person, but even for me, I was able to kind of design certain banners in Google Web Designer with ease, and just play around with those components. There's some amazing components in Google Web Designer, but definitely catch module 2. Thanks for joining. Chat to you soon. Cheers.